talking today with Stephen Faine of Farmington Hills, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Steve, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Detroit on April 16th, 1947.
Okay, did you grow up there, or did you move somewhere?
No, I moved to Farmington Township, Farmington Hills now, Farmington Township then, and I've pretty much been here my whole life.
And did you move when you were a kid, or?
Yeah, I think we moved here when I was 10 or 11.
Okay. And what did your family do for a living?
My father was a commercial artist, and my mother was a mother.
Okay. How many kids were in the family?
3. I have a much older sister who's 71 and very decrepit. And a younger hippie sister who's 61 who's coming here next week. So.
All right.
And they live far away. Santa Fe for my older sister and Amarillo for my younger sister.
Okay. And when did you finish high school?
1965, Farmington High School.
Okay. And after you got out of high school, what did you do?
Went to Michigan State and really applied myself well to everything other than class. But in my defense, they were always 8 o'clock classes, and who's going to get up at 8 o'clock class? And I kept getting stuck with 8 o'clock classes because I never got up to register until everybody had taken all the good classes, and all I had left were the 8 o'clock classes. So I'm sure it wasn't only my fault.
All right. At the time you were there, what were you studying in principal?
Pre-veterinary medicine.
Okay. All right. And then how did that span at Michigan State come to an end?
It came to an end after 2 years. 2 years of learning a lot about a lot of things other than class. So I had a .69 cumulative. See, I can't even say cumulative.
Cumulative GPA, yeah.
So though I never heard from the school, I did hear from the draft board, who did call me on a Friday morning and say, your draft notice has gone out. You can wait till you get it and come get assigned to the infantry and go to Vietnam, or today and today only, you can come down on this new deal and we'll let you pick what you want to be. But the asterisk that didn't tell me that, and then get sent to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down there and enlisted as a medic.
So when did you do that?
That would have been, well, after school let out. I was still in school when they called me. I joined in September.
Okay. Well, did you have some delay between the time when you sign up and when you report?
Yeah, there was no delay from my physical.
Mm-hmm.
When they sent me to Fort Wayne in Detroit for a physical, and then they had a bus parked right in the gymnasium so that you couldn't get away. And then they took me right to Fort Knox.
All right. Now, so maybe you initially sign up maybe in June or so, because Michigan State was on quarters or whatever they run into.
Probably, because I had time to see people.
Yeah.
Get whatever estate I had, which was nothing.
Okay. Now, when you went down for the physical, were there people who were there who were trying to scam the system in one way or another that you noticed?
There were, and also I was lucky enough to share my enlistment from that point on with a lot of people that had been given the option of jail or army. So there were quite a few people who scared me and were there because they were not necessarily scamming the system, but they were going to try to beat their way through the system.
So were they trying to get themselves out of the Army by doing something to get themselves kicked out? Or
I don't think that. I think they were... I didn't talk to them,
okay.
But I think they were just being threatening.
Mm-hmm. And
that scared me enough to not want to be too close to them. So.
All right. Now, you're going in Detroit. Were a lot of those guys black?
Yeah. And it was, a lot of it they said was because of the riots, but I'm not sure if the timing is correct on that. But
well, there were riots in '67, so... And it
was
was
about the right time then.
Kind of summer of '67, yeah. And actually, the 101st Airborne, or part of it, came up to Detroit.
Good. So, but I remember them saying, this was our choice: the riots, go to jail or go in the army.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and the draft boards were going and taking a lot of young black men out of that end of Michigan at that time.
And so maybe I should have not had such a tan or something. I don't know.
Yeah. However that worked. So anyway, so you get in there with those guys, and then you go through the physical. They load you on buses and ship you to Fort Knox.
Fort Knox, lovely Fort Knox.
Now, what kind of reception do you get at Fort Knox?
Just like on TV, screaming, yelling, drill sergeant, insulting everybody, line you up, forget you're a human, scrape off what little civilization I had at the time, which wasn't all that much, and obey and adhere. So a lot of it, then they're typical. Can you swear on this?
Sure.
they're typical. They teach you have 15 minutes to shit, shower, and shave, and get in that regiment of living a quiet, everything at my pace to doing everything at their pace.
Right. Now, in the first few days you're there, do they go through a lot of testing and processing before you get into drilling?
They did, because I saw a lot of it on my records. I don't recall anything but drilling.
All right.
Getting in the bunk and jumping out of bed, trying to get clean and ready to go, and having them yell at you for every little thing until you became what they want you to be, which I guess makes sense.
All right. What kind of physical training or activities did you get?
Much more than I ever would have gotten at home, but we had to do constant exercises. Marching, we marched all the time. Before you get to breakfast, you had to go through like an obstacle course to get to breakfast, and then we'd have to. Usually, we ran before breakfast. We ran at night in boots, which is not too comfortable. Had to, scream and yell, and I want to be an airborne ranger, living on blood and guts and danger. That's kind of...
All right. And then how much emphasis do they put on discipline?
Constant. You do it, only can do what they say.
Okay. And how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to all of that?
I don't... Because I'm sort of unaware of most everything, I didn't mind the discipline, as I'd never really had any, but I had no alternative. I didn't have the opposite of no discipline. I just sort of go along with things. So that wasn't so bad. The other people were usually more of a problem. A lot of fighting, blanket parties, and trying to decide who was king of the castle, even though we were only in that castle for 8 weeks.
All right. Define a blanket party for the uneducated.
Blanket party is if someone doesn't like something you said, and they don't want to start a fight because they'll get in trouble. So a group of them will throw a blanket over somebody and then beat them up, and then the person doesn't know who did it, so they can't really point a finger and get to them.
So you had guys who were competing for who was going to be the tough guy in the barracks or whatever, and you just stayed out of that?
I got hit a couple of times, but mostly because I was the only one who'd been to college, such as it was, even Michigan State. Now that I'm a U of M grad. I would help with letters and stuff. The kid the bunk above me, leaned over and said, "How do you spell use?" And I go, USC. He said, "No, the other one." I go, "What other one?" He said, "Take care of yourself, both of yous." I go, "Okay, well, that's not the right one." So, he was a real nice kid, but... So I think I kind of stayed more into that.
Okay. So were most of the guys then the kind of 19-year-old type, or...
Not educated, street people.
And were you largely with people who'd come down from Michigan, or were they mixing you all up?
No, I think we were all, I didn't talk to anybody. It's not like you're down there having tea afterward. You worked and then fall asleep.
Okay. And what did you think of the drill sergeants?
They were just like on television. We had a corporal who was a little nicer than normal, and then we had a drill sergeant. Actually, not terrible. I needed to learn that stuff. And you do the same kind of thing. You go for M14. We had to sleep with our M14. We had to learn how to take it apart and be intimately familiar with it. And everybody got their M14 black eye, which is the drill sergeant's favorite thing to do. You go out to the shooting range for the first time, and everybody holds the rifle this way, and everybody gets the jump and gets a black eye from it, and he thinks that's really funny. But it wasn't bad.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily extremes in terms of mistreatment or anything else like that?
No, I didn't. Not that I would have.
Okay. Now, did you have any sense of whether or not any of the people training you had been to Vietnam at that point?
I don't think anybody had.
Yeah, because it's still 67, so not as many back yet as later. What did you know about Vietnam at the point when you went in?
Nothing. And I'd like to have kept it that way. But no, I knew nothing about it.
All right. So you do 8 weeks at Fort Knox. What do they do with you next?
Then they sent us to Fort Sam Houston because I had signed up to be a medic, and Fort Sam is where you learn your medic training. Before that 8-week class started, they picked a handful, one or two per whatever, I think, companies that we're in. And they sent them to the OCS campus, that was at Fort Knox, to learn leadership preparatory course, LPC. So we had to pretend OCS, but also we did the whole 8-week course in a couple weeks, so that we would know what was going to be happening in advance and could be free to help oversee, to be the babysitters for the rest of the class. So we were picked for that, but they were so popular that one of the new marching song was, "You get a rope and I'll get a tree and we're going to hang our LPC." So I could tell you that they were the most popular people to be. But, you know, our job was to do the inspections in the barracks and help people with their homework if they needed it, and to be pretend corporals.
Okay. And you just did this for a couple of weeks? Or?
Well, that was probably a little less than a month, according to my chart, which I didn't realize. But we went to the OCS school because we had to do a lot of stuff like brasso the drains in the toilet, use our toothbrushes to clean the toilet, you know, all the stuff that they were doing for harassment. They made us do fold your dirty clothes in squares so that when they open your laundry bag, everything was folded. So I don't know what the purpose of that would have been other than to...
Well, were those things that you were supposed to make other guys do later?
No, we never made them do that. It's like they would have killed us. But I don't know why they did that. But I think it was a taste of OCS for some reason.
All right. And was this something that sort of would help you advance in rank later or whatever if you did this? Did you get any?
No, you didn't get anything for it, and I didn't ask for it. It's just kind of when you get picked for it, and I was so lackadaisical, I would kind of go along with most anything. They say I'm going to that, I go, okay, I'll go.
All right. Okay, so you've done that, and then from there it's down to Fort Sam Houston.
Well, we stayed at Fort Sam Houston for that. We just weren't with our group. We were pulled away from our group, put in another part of Fort Sam Houston, did this training, and then were brought back to the next group of medics that were
all right.
trained.
Because you had mentioned doing this at Fort Knox a moment ago.
Oh, started at Fort Knox for infantry training.
Okay.
Then went to Fort Sam Houston, but they picked us while we were there to be pulled away from the group we were with and do this extra training, and then go to the next group that was coming in.
All right.
And then I got my medics training there, by 8 weeks of medics.
Okay. And in the 8-week medic training session, what were they doing?
Good stuff, actually. Train you, how to recognize different injuries, what to do about it, how to actually learn, and something that I still have kept, and that is that your patient is your responsibility, even unto your own, more than your own life. That once they're our patients, they are ours. And so we were trained to go get them, how to fix things, how to, sucking chest wound with a cigarette pack, and just a lot of good first aid. And
so it's stuff that would actually be applicable in a combat situation, and not just
medic training.
and not just in a hospital work or something like that.
It wasn't meant for hospital. It was meant for combat medics.
And did you have anybody there who had been a combat medic?
No, I don't remember anybody that. No, they did the regular crawling under barbed wire, more shooting, that kind of stuff. More marching, more running.
And at this stage, is there anything done that's geared at all toward Vietnam, or is it just general training still?
I think it's just general combat training. Probably World War II, if anything.
Yeah. All right.
We don't usually crawl under barbed wire in Vietnam.
Yeah, barbed wire is usually yours if
Yes,
you're there.
that's
It's usually
right.
concertina wire, I guess. But all right, so you do that 8 weeks. Now, do you get a break any place here along the way as you move from camp to camp or training to training?
No breaks. They just stick you on a bus, wake up in the morning, they put you on a bus, you go somewhere else.
Okay. Now, while you were in the medic training at Sam Houston, did you get some time off now? I mean, at least your nights to yourselves, or could you go off the base?
We did. I don't know if you want to know exactly where we went to. We went to Nuevo Laredo, to Boys Town, which surprised me that there was such a place, and surprised me the things that happened there. It wasn't exactly where I thought I was going, but we did that, and we spent a little bit of time in Mexico. Not much. Just I think we only had that one day that I can recall that we actually went somewhere. And we did go somewhere in San Antonio, because I remember going to the river when it was the red light district before they made it the tourist district.
Right.
So I guess we had a day off in San Antonio and a day off in Fort Sam.
Okay. Now, when you're doing the medic training, is there less emphasis now on discipline and spit and polish, or is that
No, it's still
that's still there?
still to make sure that they want to make sure you follow rules.
Mm-hmm.
Who else would go after somebody when people are shooting, unless it's someone who has already been brainwashed into knowing that that's what they have to do.
Okay.
And I think people who pick to be medics have a natural inclination to want to take care of people.
Now, were any of the medics you were training with people who were conscientious objectors, as far as you know?
Yeah, as far as I know, they were. I couldn't tell you who they were, but I remember that coming up.
Okay. Did those guys get treated any differently by the instructors than anybody else?
I don't recall a lot of insults or anything.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you get through that 8 weeks, and then where to next?
Then I got sent to heaven for a year. There is a program, 91 Charlie, which is a hospital. It's a Wordmaster, which is the title of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there were very few people who got chosen, and I'm not sure exactly the criteria they used, but they chose like 1 or 2. And so I got shipped to Letterman Hospital at the Presidio in San Francisco. Stayed in a barracks with very few guys that were in my class. The class, there's always it's 40-week class, so it's junior year and a senior year. So we juniors, we had our own barracks. Alcatraz was on one side, Golden Gate Bridge on the other. We were right on the sand. It was wonderful. Our duties were only to go to class. Mm-hmm. Our class was in the hospital, and as I tell everybody still now, it was exquisite training. I trained literally in every department of a hospital. If we had patients, I passed meds. I did in surgery. I was a circulating nurse. I was a scrub tech. I was a surgical assistant, and later on also minor surgeries. I worked in the ER afterwards, and I did the suturing. I delivered a baby in a barracks. You just were trained to do everything, and probably more importantly, you were trained to believe you can do anything. They spent a lot of time telling us that we were the best of the best and that we were a hospital unto ourselves, which I used in my career. I mean, to the detriment of the docs that worked with me.
Now, how much sort of formal, sort of medical or nursing training did this involve, as opposed to just kind of hands-on, go in there and do it?
Oh, it was we had classes, constant classes. We had tests. We had to learn all the drugs. To the extent that when we graduated, they drove us to Sacramento to sit for the RN boards as an experiment. Mm-hmm. But in Sacramento, they said we were only in school for 18 months, so we couldn't sit for the RN boards. You had to be 24 months. So we all traipsed into the LPN boards, took quick tests, walked out, and became the first Army school, so they told us, to get a civilian license upon graduation from your MOS. So we became LPNs with a national license to pass meds. Mm-hmm. So it was, and the Army's rationale was that they would use us where they couldn't afford to lose a doctor.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Of course, the other thing is that in the military, if you're officially a nurse, that you have to be officer status.
Not an LPN.
Yeah. Okay. So the RNs or whatever, you think of sort of Army people who go on and become nurses and so forth, or the women out of MASH episodes or things like that. You know, they're Lieutenant so-and-so and so forth. But the officer connection, that's for RN level.
I don't know that RNs were officers either. I don't know that for sure.
Well, that was at least.
I guess I never knew one, so I don't know.
Oh. I once interviewed a fellow who was a Navy corpsman who wound up serving with Marines in Vietnam, and he came out and went to nursing school and went back into the Navy and goes in as an officer because the nurses were officers.
That's probably true there. Because we did have the same training.
Mm-hmm.
A corpsman, not. But a 91 Charlie, yes.
Yeah.
We were, because we were trained to pass meds. And I did my own lab work, my own x-rays. I put on my own casts. They just trained you to make a striker, but I can make an ICU out of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, when did you get there? Was that sort of early '68 now, or?
Probably so. And I spent a lot of time at the Golden Gate Park and on Haight and Ashbury with the hippie girls. And it was heaven. Someone fed me and housed me and gave me a lot of freedom because nobody was over us. So you wanted to skip class as long as you made it up. Mm-hmm. It was something that you could skip class. You could tell if you were assigned to the OR. You can say, well, we're assigned over here today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody, who are they going to call? It's like, so we would do stuff, we would goof off and head out across the Sausalito and spend a lot of time, because that's beautiful territory out there.
All right. Now, a lot is going on in the country in 68 and so forth. And you're there basically that year and into 69 before you leave.
We didn't. I was not aware. The big thing for us that kept all of our attention is they built the brand new Letterman Hospital that year, and our last thing that we did was help move patients from the old Letterman, the World War II Letterman Hospital, to the new Letterman General Hospital. So all of our, I think, excess capacity was spent doing that. And I was in a barracks with a lot of Mormons, so I would go with them to. They always said, "You're almost a Mormon. You don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't drink coffee, so you're almost a Mormon. Why don't you come with us?" I had nothing else to do, so I went with them.
Okay. Now, were you aware of sort of major national events going on? I mean, assassination of Martin Luther King, for instance, or Bobby Kennedy, or...
Well, Bobby Kennedy didn't happen then. It was after, because I saw that. I mean, I saw it on TV, so I don't think that happened when I was in San Francisco, did it?
Well, Bobby Kennedy is assassinated sort of in the summer of 68.
That just tells you how aware I am. I have no idea the time. I don't even know exactly when I was there. And as I said about Vietnam, they don't. If they don't tell me where I am, I don't have a lot of extra curiosity to figure it out.
Right.
I knew I wasn't home, and that I had to do what they said so I could go home.
Yeah. So you're really kind of caught up in your own world and what's going on immediately around you.
Which is why I was doing so bad at Michigan State.
All right. Now, over the course of this 40-week training program that you're in, all this stuff, was your expectation that you would then go to Vietnam once it was done?
No, because they're hospital-based. So it was. They told us over and over, "You're going to be in a hospital," and I was assigned to Fort Benjamin Harrison, to that hospital.
Okay, you may have been there. You might have been, depending on timing, you might have been there when Bobby Kennedy got killed. I don't know, but regardless. Okay, so you finish. So you do your 40 weeks of training. You get out of there, and now you're sent to Indianapolis. All right, and you spend a full year there.
Living in a trailer off campus and meeting a lot of new people, having a lot of fun.
Now, was this basically like having just sort of a regular job?
It was a Wordmaster. So, well, as you know, in the Civil War, that was where Wordmaster started with Letterman, General Letterman. And I went to Letterman. I went to his school. I went to his hospital and learned his program. Hospital stewards turned into Wordmasters, and Wordmasters, I think, are still necessary for hospitals. They are hospital administrator who actually is active in the hospital would be a lot like a Wordmaster, as opposed to one who's at a desk all the time.
Now, what were you actually doing then as a Wordmaster at Benjamin Harrison?
I was in charge of the ER, and the way Wordmaster system works is the hospital, doctors do doctoring, nurses do nursing. Wordmasters have all the authority over the patients and the hospital. So between the MSC officers, who are the brains, and then the Wordmasters, who are the muscle, we would make things work. You know, you just not necessarily follow the bureaucracy. You might find other ways, but we made it work.
Okay. Now, did you have people working under you?
Yeah, all the medics that were working in the ER were mine. And if I was on duty, if I was the on-call Wordmaster, then anybody in the hospital would have been my responsibility.
Okay. How big was the hospital there?
It was actually quite large, but I couldn't tell you. I didn't ever watch. It's a World War II hospital, so it was really scattered, just a lot of little segments in. And I worked at the Methodist General Hospital in Indianapolis evening shifts. I worked midnight shift in the ER. So I was not there.
Were you doing that as part of your military duty, or moonlighting?
Moonlighting, just to have something to do.
Okay. So what was, I mean, what's a daily schedule like then while you're there? You report at certain hours?
You get up and, do whatever you had to do, clean up your room and paperwork that you had to do. And for me, I would go to Methodist for the afternoon shift and then come back in time to do midnights at the ER. And my girlfriend, my fiance, now wife, back then I would usually, Saturday was always GI party day. So Saturday morning everybody got up and cleaned everything that didn't move and then painted wood did. And then I would drive from Indianapolis to Ann Arbor to see her, stay up all night. Don't touch that part. And then get in the car and drive back in time for my Indianapolis Monday shift. So I was always busy, though. Doing what? I couldn't really, I can't pinpoint. I wasn't watching TV or reading newspapers or...
And then the people being treated at the hospital there, were they just the military personnel who were on the base?
They were that, and because that was our big thing. Saturdays, someone would get in a bar fight, and as punishment, we would sew them up with no anesthetic and do that kind of stuff and do procedures. And that's why that woman who called, the guy called and said, my wife is having a baby. They were in the second floor of a barracks. I looked in her chart and said, it's not time, so call us in the morning. Because I was the sergeant. I should know best. And then he called him back, and I said, I told you it's not time. And he said, she's really saying the baby. I said, I'm going to come down there and make sure you guys understand. But I was greeted by the baby's head, so I was wrong. They were right. And the baby came out, and I was glad he had arms because I grabbed him by his hips, and he slid right through my hands. I was so nervous. It was her first baby. She wasn't even nervous. She said, I'm going to change my dress. I said, no, we got to get to the hospital. But I was a lot more nervous than she was. So you get to do a lot of stuff like that. All
right. Now, at what point do you find out you're going to Vietnam?
Get a nice little order that says, the captain, we reported to a captain, Captain Shirley. I don't know his real name, and I think maybe one of the reasons I went is because I kept calling him Captain Shirley, but because he was a nurse. And I think I was insinuating something that maybe he picked up on, and I was trying to be subtle, but apparently not that subtle. So I got my orders and said, you're heading out to Vietnam, see ya. And his last words just were, keep your ass down.
All right. Now, while you're working there at that hospital, were there some medics coming through who had been to Vietnam and were...
I don't think I met a one. I never met anybody who had been there until I got to New Jersey as the staging area for Vietnam. And I think there I ran into some people.
Okay. Did they send you to Fort Dix or somewhere else?
I don't know if it was a fort or not. It was just a place. It was it was a building where we had to wait for our plane, and I had to get a tooth fixed, so I was there doing that. And I don't know if it was a fort or not. I never walked around.
Did you get to leave home before you shipped out?
Yes. Okay. And I also took an extra weekend where I rolled up my bed on a Friday and took a plane home and was AWOL, and then the sergeant who was on duty said, I noticed you weren't here Saturday. I said, so what'd you write down? And did you write Saturday? And he said, Saturday you're not here. I said, what'd you write for Friday? He said, Friday you were here. I said, my plane ticket said I was in Detroit on Friday. So if you turn me in, you're going to get in trouble for not really doing a very good count. So he left it. I said, so what are you going to do, send me to Vietnam? Which was what everybody said. We were probably not a very disciplined group.
All right. Now you flew out of New Jersey then? Or
yes, okay. As far as I know.
Okay. All right. But I mean, do you fly to somewhere else in the States, or how do they physically get you to Vietnam?
I don't know. I was in an airplane.
Okay.
That's really all I know about. I remember coming back. We stopped in Japan, and that they kept us away from the terminal because we couldn't associate with people. This is what they told us. They said, we can't mix you with regular people. You have to be out here on the runway. So.
All right. So basically, going over there is a blur.
Until I got there. The minute I stepped off of the plane, I knew I was someplace bad.
Now, do you know where you landed in Vietnam?
No.
Okay.
I think Cameron Bay, but I don't know for sure. I just know when they open those doors and it is so hot and so heavy, so humid, so diesel stinky. I still, when I smell diesel, it takes me right back there because it's all you smell.
When did you arrive in Vietnam?
I think May.
Of 1970?
Yeah.
Okay.
It had to be 1970 because I came home in 71.
Right.
I think. I must sound like I'm really stupid.
No. I mean, different things register in different ways with different people, and there's a lot of other stuff that happens to you while you're there that's going to maybe occupy more of the frontal part of your memory. than something like that.
Yes, remembering what I was like when I had hair.
All right, you land. So you have that first impression of getting off the plane in Vietnam, and the blast of heat and everything else just hits you at that point. What did they do with you when you got off the plane?
Stuck me in a Jeep, and then I drove to someplace in, well, I didn't drive there, I think we flew.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere they flew me to Camp Evans, and then dropped me off at the first of the 506, our aid station.
Okay, so that's 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry,
Right.
101st Airborne.
And I just know that it was black. The blackest black that I can ever imagine. And I'm still, well, I was being belligerent, but I was just scared about being there. I said, I'm a 91 Charlie. I'm supposed to be in a hospital. Why am I in the infantry battalion? Because the desk jockeys think that we don't go to combat. The lifers think, well, one of you is going to go to a battalion because we need that kind of expertise for our colonel. If knowing our colonel, I wouldn't have helped them no matter what. But I didn't know him, and I didn't know at the time exactly. I couldn't figure out why I was there. I kept thinking they made a mistake. I kept telling everybody, you made a mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm a 91 Charlie. I'm a Wordmaster. I belong in a hospital. There's no hospital here.
So you land. You basically you're taken to your battalion area, dropped off. What kind of reception do you get when you get there?
Well, none. And that was it was just black as night. The guy who drove me just said, you know, there's a hooch. He said, go in there and find a bunk.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt my way around, laid down in an empty bed with my clothes on, telling myself that I can't believe I'm sitting here in a jungle, wishing I'd gone to class.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, then I kept thinking, here I'm in a jungle, there's tigers here. And that turned out there really were tigers there, but I just imagined it at the time. And then I heard claws walking down the wooden floor. And I'm thinking, I'm really imagining things, because I didn't even know where the bathroom was, so I didn't know where I was. And there was no bathroom. So then I hear the claws coming to my bed, walking around my bed, and I'm going, I'm not imagining this. There's really a tiger here. And I heard the sniffing and the snortling, and felt the paws on my bed, at the foot of my bed, and then this huge animal gets up on the bed, and I'm just laying there stiff as a board, thinking, I'm dead. What is he gonna look at me before he eats me? What is he gonna do? So I laid that way until morning, and it turned out to be our dog Michelle, who wasn't all that big, but she felt big, and I was the only bed that didn't have a mosquito net on it, so she took the opportunity to sleep with somebody. And she was my best friend after that, and died in my arms from rat poisoning, but not that day. Several months later.
So you wake up, you discover your companion's a dog. All right. Now, does anybody then tell you what you're doing or what you're supposed to do next?
No, because I was the Wordmaster. I was in charge. I was supposed to tell them what to do.
Okay.
So.
And what were you in charge of?
The medics go to headquarters company, and then they're distributed to the combat companies. Well, the 91 Charlie, other than the medical service corps officer, who's in charge of everybody who's off doing whatever lieutenants do, then the Wordmaster's job is to make sure everybody gets their equipment, they gets trained on techniques, answer questions about drugs, performs a sick call for whatever companies are in for stand down, to answer most of them who don't want to go back out, and I didn't blame them, but the idea was if they didn't go out, then I could have gone instead, which wouldn't have worked very well. So it was sick calls and meds, and then going on training missions where we would steal the Marines' wine because they had everything and we had nothing. So.
And was there a Marine base near yours?
No,
or?
we had to drive to it.
Okay, are they down more toward Da Nang, or are they?
Yeah, because they were someplace where they had a hamburger joint, and they had sheets. I knew what they had.
Well, what was the setup like at Camp Evans?
Pretty bare. It was a lowland fort, so it was just a flat area surrounded by foxholes and barbed wire. Very large, and a lot of hooches and bunkers, and divvied up into companies, which again I was unaware. I listen to my tapes now, and I hear about, our mess hall was taken away, and I go, I didn't know we had a mess hall, but apparently we did. And and other things, and we'd have to go to another company's mess hall. So mostly we just stole food, and they had us on C rations, and even on our Evans. They always had us on C rations and LURPs. They brought us LURPs to Firebase Catherine. We were the early LURP eaters. Only thing is they didn't bring us water. It's just they give us this freeze-dried, dehydrated food, but no water to eat it with. And I ate it, and it wasn't that bad.
Right.
Spaghetti.
Well, okay. Now, how long did you spend at Camp Evans before you go someplace else?
Well, Camp Evans was our base camp, so
Yeah.
I always stayed at Camp Evans in terms of where I was from. I would be rotated to fire bases, mostly, again, to make sure the colonel had the highest level of care close by, and to make sure the medics had assistance, help. You know, if they had questions or whatever was coming up, they needed someone to ask. Couldn't afford a doctor out in a combat area. An MSC officer isn't clinical. So
you're sort of the one with the right training, at least in principle, to field that kind of question. What was do you remember the first time you went out to a fire base?
I do. Firebase Catherine, and a helicopter took us out. There was 3 cherries, me and 2 cherries from Delta Company, first of the 506. Brand new guys. So the 3 of us were in the helicopter, and the gunner turned to us and said, 2 out of 3 cherries will die on Catherine. I'm counting. There's 3 of us in here. And it turned out that as we landed, those 2 cherries stepped into a foxhole and were blown up. It was booby-trapped. So I spent the next morning cutting them out of the wire and putting them in body bags. So they died for me.
Right. Now, why were you not with them, or?
Well, they're infantry.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There's riflemen, and they just go into the foxhole.
They would have gone into the foxhole and take guard duty. I was medic, so
Yeah.
I went into the aid station.
Okay. So you're going into an established fire base, yet somehow or other somebody has managed to booby-trap a foxhole. So it's not like you were going into a place and occupying it or reoccupying it.
Right, because we were the only people ever to be on that piece of land. It was created by us, for us.
And somehow someone got in there. And
There were 8 Chuhois, Kid Carson Scouts,
Okay.
which never makes sense, just because you chase somebody until they give up. Now all of a sudden they're your best friends, but that's the Army way.
So these are basically Vietnamese that have been Viet Cong or North Vietnamese that have been persuaded to be on your side now.
Right, because they were captured. Once you're cornered, then that's your choice. So they were our guides, and they were on our fire base. So one of them would have been, one or all of them would have been the ones to booby trap the foxhole. So we knew it was one of those 8.
And what happened with them?
They were taken in a helicopter back to Evans for questioning. But we were told by the pilots, the infantry guys, that they were just thrown out of the helicopter. That it had to be one of them, so they were all thrown out.
Okay, this is kind of a striking sort of welcome to Vietnam or welcome to life in the field. Yeah, I mean, how did you respond to all of this stuff that's going on? Especially you have to go out there and deal with the bodies and that kind of stuff.
It was difficult. I still see those bodies every day, those 2, especially one who actually is from Dearborn. He's from here because he looks so sweet. I mean, their injuries, I know it sounds weird, but he was peaceful. His face, it didn't get his face because they stepped into a foxhole. They had mirror images. They both had legs ripped off. They were both disemboweled and then lost the opposite arm, but mirror of each other. But their faces were still calm.
Oh, and it's instantaneous.
Yeah, they stepped in it and blew up, and they were gone. But I still think about them every day.
Now, once you're out on a fire base and you've dealt with this, then what do you do, or how long do you stay?
Well, and I was listening to that tape again this morning too. It's a rotation. So I have a tape that says, we stayed a week on this fire base, and then we stood down. Medics had to stand down because we had to give shots to everybody who would come in. So if they were a Delta company, would come in for a few days and get new uniforms and get food, and we had to make sure we gave them all their vaccines and cleaned up their wounds, got their trench foot treated, and treated anything that they had that needed work. So that was our time to buff them up.
Okay. So wasn't vaccination mostly done before people got sent over?
We
or
gave them shots all the time they were there.
What are you giving him shots for?
No, I can't remember exactly now, but we did.
All right.
It's like, shots, and some guys had clap and a few other things, and we'd give them penicillin. But we were giving shots to people all the time.
All right. Now, then, so were you doing some of the treating yourself, or were you just okay? What do you do with jungle rot, for instance?
Jungle rot's a bacterial and a yeast, in fact, fungus and bacterial concomitant at the same time. So mostly you're supposed to dry it off, but you can do it with an antifungal cream, but you have to make sure that it gets air, so it can't be Vaseline based. It's got to be water based. And give them bacitracin and other antibiotic creams, not the Vaseline based. Try to keep them dry. Mostly a medic's job, even in the field, is to make sure that there's clean socks, dry socks, and that guys are taking their socks off and putting on dry socks, and do as much prevention as possible.
Right.
To make sure they take their malaria pills, make sure they take their salt pills, make sure if they have a prescription, like a lot of them did with antibiotics, make sure they take it. And when it was common, we would take the prescription and double it, because we knew that they wouldn't take it consistently. Their medic knew that they wouldn't take it consistently, so they doubled our, and then the guys wouldn't believe anybody, so they would double what the medic told them to take. So God only knows what they actually ended up taking, but they seem to not have gotten too bad off of that.
All right. I've heard periodically that some guys were kind of resistant to taking the anti-malarial drugs.
Oh, yes. Because you take it on Monday, which means you have diarrhea on Tuesday. As I said on my first night, there's no toilets. So you have diarrhea and you have no toilet, and you're kind of miserable. So it's that we would periodically have a trench someplace, or a box that we could use as a toilet, but
wouldn't an established base like Evans have some kind of latrines?
Yeah, but that was not as bad. Even that is still it's kind of an open place. You're sharing with a lot of guys, and it wasn't exactly like an ensuite in my master bedroom. It's it's like you find it and you go to it and don't even dare go to it at night. So for us, we would pass out anti-Gulamodal, so that people wouldn't have to go to the bathroom at night, and then in the morning we'd have to give them something so they would go to the bathroom, because that was the opportunity. But on a firebase on Catherine, the box was right next to the aid station, but it was at the highest point of the mountain. So who stupidly, when engineer put it there, because you're outlined. If it's a moonlit night, you might as well just put a target on your forehead. So.
Okay. Describe a little bit the physical setting of Catherine, because that's the base that you go to. Did you go there several times during the time? Okay. What did it look like?
Catherine was a mountaintop that had been denuded by Agent Orange, and I think they said a couple of 1,000-pound bombs. So it's bald, and pretty much the shape of it at both ends of it wasn't real big. So at the two ends, one was a gun emplacement, the other was a helicopter pad, and then along the two edges were just bunkers. So we might have had 6 or 8 bunkers that I can recall.
Yeah, so that's not real large.
Not large at all.
That few.
And then around it would have been pillboxes and fighting holes and machine gun placements and stuff like that, and then barbed wire and that kind of stuff. But it felt big in a little bit of a way, and it felt real safe.
All right. Now, when you're on a base like that, do you get attacked in one fashion or another?
We were rocketed all the time, and our sister battalion, the 2nd of the 506 on Ripcord, which is the next mountain over, they were, we'll say, wiped out. Depends on what lifer you talk to, but between minor injuries, and we know that most everybody got killed on top of the mountain. They got attacked, literally attacked, gassed and mortared, and the Vietnamese were in the wire. So that was pretty bad for them.
They were having a lot of the actual fighting that was going on in the valleys and hills immediately around it and in the jungle collectively, but that whole area was very hot. Catherine, though, are you...
I'll just tell it to turn off.
All
right. So Catherine, so you get rocket attacks. Do you ever get mortars or snipers or things like that?
Well, they had snipers, they had sappers coming in under the wire,
Mhm.
and then we had what was called mad minutes. I'm sure every firebase had those, and where it's where they shot off a flare, and everybody, including the medics,
Mhm.
got into their fighting positions, which we had a couple by the aid station, and would just shoot down the mountain, and in the morning see if you hit anything. You know, if anybody was crawling through, they would just be surprised. And we did periodically find bodies in the wire. So we were a target, but I think Ripcord was a bigger target
Yeah.
because it was lower too,
Yeah.
easier to get to. We were pretty high.
Yeah. And Ripcord was physically close to their own supply routes and bases. They wanted to get rid of it. You guys were a little bit farther out of that.
But we were put there to also attack the
Yeah.
Shaw Valley. But
Right.
I think we were much taller, higher. I don't know that anybody wanted us. They could have been shot down on, from what I heard from people that were there, as opposed to nobody could shoot down on us.
Right, right. You didn't have any other hills looking down at you.
No.
Yeah, a little more secure as far as that goes. All right. Now, were there sapper attacks going on while you were on Catherine?
For us, they didn't blow us up, but most of mortars.
Mhm.
We got mortared more than sappered,
Okay.
as far as I know. But it's not like anybody. I never went to reports, and I didn't, actually get to walk around every night. I didn't walk anywhere at night, so I know that we were mortared because I have pictures of it and I saw it. But I don't know if we got sappered. We did in Evans.
Mm-hmm.
I just did the one tape where, in the time that we were at Catherine, Evans was attacked. There was 30 injuries and 1 death, and it was attacked over and over again. I go, oh, it's good timing.
Yeah. And Evans was in what should have been a relatively secure area. It's closer to the coast and
Closer
a lot
to the coast and closer to the DMZ.
Yeah.
So, and unprotected.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good combination, I don't think. But, and they had Vietnamese working there,
Right.
which kind of silly. So you got guys in there, mapping things, measuring things, and then mortaring you as soon as they go home after they watch TV and have a little dinner.
Right.
They go out, instead of going to a bar, they go out and mortar Camp Evans.
Okay. How much contact did you have with any of the Vietnamese, like when you were on Evans or elsewhere?
Never. When I first got to Catherine, the three cherry
Right.
story.
Right.
I was told to go take care of one of the Kit Carson scouts of the 8. One of them claimed to have a stomach ache.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood later from people that I was being a cherry and stupid. I was administering to him with my back to the other 7, and I had plenty of weapons on me, and that, knowing that they knew they were going to get caught doing what they did, I was probably going to make a good escape plan.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody, and I have no idea who, I wasn't paying attention, never paid attention to things, but was watching over to make sure that they didn't decide to use my gun as their escape mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably the only Vietnamese on Evans, Catherine, that I talked to.
Yeah.
Didn't talk to any on Evans. Periodically, I think we did get to do laundry once in a while, and I think I might have talked to somebody, but not often. And we did med caps. We would go to the villages. I don't know if I talked to them, but
Well, just what kind of, how much do you see of them, or what kind of interaction do you have? So, at a med cap, what are you doing? What's happening?
med cap is we go in there as medics and have a clinic and try. You can't really do a lot because a lot of their issues are chronic and endemic to their diet and to where they live. But we could clean wounds and pass out vitamins and more window dressing. You can't fix something. You can talk to them or give them stuff. So as I said on my tape, they were eating the pills like they were candy. They were eating the bags of tracing like it was food. Okay, well, so the idea is there, but the installation wasn't so good. But
So when you go out on one of these, it's you and who else?
well, usually either me and another medic or me and a driver.
Mm-hmm.
I only went on a couple, so
Okay, but not anybody along who can speak Vietnamese or anything like that. Yeah, so you're
and
just-
nobody to guard us either. So you're supposed to be, it's supposed to be fairly safe, and you're supposed to use good judgment. Neither of which I'm capable of. So, as I said, the one time I stopped because it was such a beautiful place. It was right on the sea. It was a fishing village, and so I went skinny dipping with my driver. So we both left our guns, our clothes, my glasses, in the Jeep and had a good time. And came out to find that we were surrounded by children.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness. It was just children, and and I know you can't really trust a child any more than you can trust an adult. But in the village, they all seemed.
Mm-hmm. But your stuff
fun.
was still there when you got back.
Yeah, they were just standing there waiting for us to
Mm-hmm.
come out and laughing, pointing, and being very complimentary. So we were just lucky that it was just being stupid.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, about what proportion of the time do you think you would have been spending the night on Evans as opposed to out in the fire base?
I'm guessing we probably was on the fire base 40%, 50% of the time, because we occupied 5 or 6 fire bases. So we would rotate. We would come off of, we never got to Ripcord, even though that was officially our brigade's territory. But we would go to Bastogne, Rakassan, Jack, a bunch of other fire bases, and mostly just to give medical care.
Now, were you kind of going wherever the battalion commander went, or the headquarters unit went, or?
I don't think so, though I didn't really know who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that the one fire base I went to, the medics called and said they had a soldier with appendicitis, and the colonel said, go take it out. And I'm going, okay. Which I didn't have to. Thank goodness medevac choppers are the most wonderful, bravest, best people in the world. I said throw them in the river to get them cold because it was monsoon season. And the helicopter came and got them, because I could have, that's what I would have done.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's probably the only, I know, so the colonels must have been around. And I did tell you about the fire base where we were socked in. And again, there was a colonel there who said, here's the chain of command. If I'm killed, the colonel's killed, who's next in command, who's next in command.
Right. Can you tell that story a little bit more fully, because you've talked about that off camera. What's happening in that situation?
That fire base, it was above ground, because it was a different kind of mountain. And in fact, which I didn't tell you, it was all Connex, all steel containers, and a helicopter had crashed on our mountaintop. The pilot hit wrong, and his helicopter rolled down. It was a Loach, the small egg-shaped helicopter. It rolled down the mountain, and I ran down to get him, but I passed him as he was running up, saying, "Run, it's going to blow." I go, "Oh, I'm sliding." But luckily, the Loach's design was the motor had already ripped off, the rotors had ripped off, everything had ripped off, so there was nothing to blow. And so he was my roommate for the night, and he was really crazy. I mean, the trauma and stuff, and there were rats like there are everywhere, and he was trying to shoot them. And I'm going to say, we're in a steel box. I have to tell you, those bullets are not going to, number one, they're not going to hit the rat. And I says, then the only person who's going to get hit is us. And I just loaded him up with Benadryl, and he went out. It's like, because he was going to shoot that. But so on that fire base, we were socked in. And I had come in on one chopper to relieve the medics so they can go back and get pills and stuff. But by the time they left, we got sucked in, and I was by myself. So this was, we were surrounded by the 8th NVA Regiment, I still remember. Then they would have these nighttime meetings with the colonel who would say, here's the chain of command. We can't fight them off. We're almost out of ammunition. We're almost out of food. And he said, here's what happens if this guy gets killed. And I guess, okay, yeah, fine. Then it was, here's the signal the next night for evacuation. This is evacuate by chopper. Here we evacuate by truck or this way. So, yeah. Then the third night he said, here's your Willie Peter grenades. Blow up your bunker as you run off of the aid station. I go, wait a minute. I mean, off the bunker.
Yeah.
Fire base.
Yeah.
I go, wait. See, now I wanted to listen a little careful, but it's too late. And that was, as I said, my only religious experience there, because we were socked in this solid clouds, and then there was one tiny, tiny little spot of blue overhead, and out of that blue spot came lots of helicopters, and it was so beautiful to see them come down. And I got on one and left right away because there was medics coming
Right.
on food and supplies. But that was also the fire base where the chopper pilot needed to land the medevac chopper for something, and he said, "Is there a clear spot?" And I go, "It's a fire base. I don't know how big a spot do you need." And we went through all this thing about how big his rotors were, which I had no idea what that was. He just said, "Find a spot, squat down, and hold a flashlight over your head. I'll land on that." never did say when I could move out of the way. It
Mm-hmm.
just said, I'll land on that. So we did work it out, and he did land. And I don't know who he picked up, but he landed fine and safe.
All right. What do you think your closest call probably was while you were in Vietnam in terms of getting hit yourself or?
Well, you know, there's so many times where I was supposed to have been killed by the Kit Carson Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
Our bunker was, our aid station was blown up 3 times. I showed you the picture of
Mm-hmm.
it. They bulldozed it. I was on 2 convoys to different towns where just the Jeep, which we shouldn't have done, but we did,
Mm-hmm.
drove in a Jeep, and the convoy behind us got ambushed. But they let us through because we were too little. But I mean, how
Mm-hmm.
stupid can you? I did so many stupid things. The thing with Woodstock and Sheba, when our 2 puppies got into the rat poisoning at night and gave them adrenaline and tried to get them to a vet tech, which we knew was somewhere on the fire base,
Mm-hmm.
and the driver and me, and I think one other guy, because it was a pretty big Jeep, and in there in our boxers, our combat boots, our flak vests, our helmets, our guns, and our dogs, and we drove between the wire and the foxholes in Vietnam. Probably the most pot-addicted fire base camp there is, to the other side of the base camp to get to the vet techs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why we thought that was a smart idea, but we didn't mind anything happen to our puppies, and we
Mm-hmm.
got there, and they did live.
Because your previous dog had died from eating the rat poison already. And,
Michelle, the one who scared me,
mm-hmm.
that's why she got the rat poisoning. She walked and came up and laid in my lap and died in my
Mm-hmm.
lap. So we weren't going to let that happen to these puppies, which we worked really hard to steal from another company who had a bunch of puppies and would not share them.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't give us one, so we went out in 2 Jeeps. One Jeep started a fight out front, and the clerk and I in the back, and we stole 2 puppies. So we needed them, and they didn't want to share.
Right. All right. Now, the people who hear things about Vietnam or whatever, I mean, there's certain kinds of stories that come up fairly commonly and so forth. And one of them was the drug use was sort of prevalent or whatever in Vietnam. And what awareness did you have, if any, of what was going on there?
Well, that I did, considering how unaware I am of everything I knew about drugs, especially because I carried so much morphine,
Mm-hmm.
as did all the medics. And in fact, we lost a lot of morphine. One of our medics was a drug addict, and he stole a lot of stuff, but don't count that, especially if the FBI is listening. And then we got in trouble for reporting him, because we shouldn't have been keeping our money where he could have stole it, but that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere we went, there were drug issues and people smoking dope, and a lot of racial issues, a lot of fighting, a lot of bad stuff. I carried a .45, as I told my family. I slept with it to protect myself against Americans, not against Vietnamese, because I had what anybody else would have wanted, though apparently they didn't know it,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody ever came into my sphere enough to even scare me to think that they were looking at me like a raw bone when they were hungry. So,
All right. Now, when you were out on the fire bases, were there people smoking marijuana out there, things like that?
I didn't see any,
Okay.
because I don't know that anybody there would have been that much more and that much different than me, and not just scared out of their wits.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they would have taken it. I don't think they would have taken a chance of dimming their response time.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they didn't,
Mm-hmm.
because it was just a scary time. It was hard to be there.
Okay. Now, when they come in to Evans for stand down, would you have guys who would get drunk or smoke dope or that kind of thing?
Constantly.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I can't say that some of our medics weren't a little bit under the weather themselves, because as I showed you the picture, we would we would do things to antagonize all the guys coming in for stand down for their shots. And one of our favorite tricks was to use a big Toomey syringe full of Maalox and a spinal needle, and to stand there like we were going to give them a shot with that, in which many of them were smart enough to, explain to us in different languages that they were not going to get that. Though others, as I showed you, one guy just pulled his pants down and bent over. Like, I don't know what he was thinking, why he would have been so willing to.
Did you, in fact, inject Maalox into people?
Oh, no, we wouldn't do that. we were crazy, but not stupid. And then one guy, our clerk went after somebody, and he passed out. And the clerk stood over him while he was unconscious, and so when he woke up, he still was standing there with that syringe. So they did smoke bomb us as they left, smoke grenade us. So they got their revenge because that was hard to clean.
All right. Now this tape is getting about up, so we're going to pause right here. All right. We're kind of talking about different kinds of issues and things that just kind of relate to morale and discipline and life in Vietnam, especially in a larger base camp. There's a lot of stuff about racial issues and so forth, especially in the rear areas of gangs of black soldiers going around behaving oddly and so forth. I mean, did any of that register with you, or did you see anything like that?
That, again, my unawareness was lifted for that. That was everywhere. And I did, in one of my letters to my wife, I said, I felt strangely safe on Firebase Catherine. And now that I've heard more about what was really going on in Evans, I understand why. Catherine's very small. There wasn't that many people on top of the mountain. I stayed in my bunker.
Yeah.
So, but on Evans, we had a lot of issues, a lot of fights, a lot of intricate handshakes and identifications, mostly to exclude people than just to include people. So it was a very common issue, and I usually didn't go anywhere. I didn't go to the mess hall. I don't even know what was around me. I stayed at the aid station, our hooch, or head out to the fire base. I didn't go anywhere else.
Did you get any kind of recreation in while you were out there?
No.
USO or going to the beach? Or
well, we had the USO. I must admit that. We did have, I say no so fast because it was not supposed to be, but I had probably three things. I went to one USO, Filipino USO, though that was at Eagle Beach, so that counts as, that was two in one. That was the twofer.
Right.
And then one Bob Hope show that we were real far away from, but we did get close. We did get to see part of it. I did sneak off to Eagle Beach, and that was kind of fun. And we had a Filipino USO show there, and hot dogs, which is what I have on my tape. Hot dogs and hamburgers and sheets on the beds. Okay.
If you're sneaking on, okay, first of all, where is Eagle Beach relative to Evans? Is it just on the coast?
It's on the it's the northern part of the South China Sea. It's just Eagle. Well, everything is Eagle for 101st. It was our beach, and I had put on my tape again. It was fortified, but it was in an area that nobody really cared about. It makes no sense why I thought that made it safe, but they cared about it if they knew we were sitting around there unarmed. But it had an outdoor, little drive-in kind of, not drive-in because we didn't drive, but we sit outside and they had movies and they had band and they had games and they had food 24 hours a day and everything was, and a little PX. Because I bought the tape recorder that I taped my letter on at Eagle Beach.
All right. And how would you get over there?
Well, there I hitchhike. I wasn't supposed. You're supposed to go there as a group during stand downs. That was a stand down activity, but I didn't get stand down because we didn't have a group. So I had to go to, apparently I didn't remember that, do my SATs in Fubai. So I was hitchhiking to Fubai, took my SAT, and I was hitchhiking back, and the guy said, I'm only going as far as Eagle Beach. So I said, I'll go with you. And I stopped off there, and then I looked around and said, I think I'll stay here. So I stayed for the night, and it was kind of fun. And then I was hitchhiking back to Camp Evans, and I went to the helicopter pad, and I saw a sergeant major there, and I said, I'm trying to get to Camp Evans. He says, well, I'm going to Camp Evans, I'll take you. And then a private helicopter lands, a little Loach, and I sit in this little teeny seat in the back, because it's only a two-seater.
Right.
And I did say to him, by getting myself even worse in trouble, because I probably was also mouthing off about trying to get out of the 101st and go to one of the evac hospitals who really needed a 91 Charlie, when the 101st didn't need a 91 Charlie. So it turned out that he was the sergeant major for the 101st Division. So, though I don't know, I didn't get in trouble, though I did get promoted to E6. The only reason I can think of is he was trying to, I don't know what, but I don't know if he did it because there was no orders, so I can't find anything. There's no paperwork for my year in Vietnam. It's missing, all the papers. But so I hitchhiked with him back from Evans from Eagle Beach to Evans.
All right. Within your own unit, were there any officers that you dealt with regularly or worked with, or did they just go in and out?
We had a lieutenant MSC officer who we talked to periodically. Though I don't know what he did. We didn't see him all that much, and I don't know what he was doing. We didn't see him.
So who did you actually report to?
Well, you didn't have to really report to anybody. I had a job, and my job was to take care of everybody in the battalion. So, I mean, all the medics, to make sure the medics were able to take care of everybody in the battalion. And the lieutenant would have been the boss. And we had a doctor that they'd come and go, but we had him near the end.
Yeah. Well, when you got there, did anybody explain to you what you were supposed to be doing, or you just kind of had to figure it out for yourself?
And nobody tells you anything. You figure it out. And then I was replaced by another 91 Charlie, and we worked together for a little while, so I was able to tell him.
Okay, but you didn't work with the guy you replaced though first.
He was long gone.
He was already gone. Okay.
Either gone or dead. I don't know, and I didn't want to know.
All right. Now, how much communication did you have with home while you were over there?
Writing. I have a whole box here of letters, and then from the day I went to Eagle Beach, then I was able to do cassette tapes and send those back. And my wife and I are going through them again. We didn't for like 40 years, and then we just listened to them again recently, and now we're doing them again. But the hard part is I would send her a letter, and she would write me a letter saying, I don't get any letters, and I'm trying to send her a letter, but by the time it gets there, or she might get 3 or 4 at a time, then I try to explain to her, well, I don't have paper and pencils. It's when I find something that's dry, I can write a letter, or when I'm back at Evans.
Yeah.
I said, and we didn't have phones or anything else, so it was just when I can get a paper, I write a letter, and then the tapes. And the tapes seemed to help because I don't know why they showed up faster than letters did, but letters would be best. And we numbered them because she said, I got letter number 24, and then I got letter 21, where you answered my question about this. And in fact, for the Agent Orange workup in the last few years ago, part of the process now is they want you to go to a psychiatrist for 2 sessions to ascertain your base level. I guess they felt that after 9/11, a lot of the Vietnam vets were having a lot of PTSD reoccurrences. So I went to this 12-year-old. I can't even tell if she was born, but she wasn't born. So she's listening to my tapes, and what was the point of that? Well, she wanted to hear what you think about when mortars are going off or bombs are going off. So I showed her the tape, and she goes, here the bomb is going off, and you're saying, yes, that China pattern, I agree with you on that China pattern from the PASIX catalog, because we were planning our wedding and buying stuff. So get the explosion, and then go back to talking about the China pattern. And but I knew I wasn't an incoming, but they were loud and they were outgoing, I hoped.
Right. Now, when you're writing home or you're recording tapes, do you really talk very much about what you're doing, or just saying I'm okay, or?
You're mostly trying to show you're okay, though I noticed on the tape about Ripcord that I was showing you that I did talk about how everybody was killed. And I probably shouldn't have done that because, you're not there to explain it. You're not there to say, well, their mountain isn't like right next door. Even if I say it's the next mountain over from us, it's not like across the street. You couldn't get there from here. So I didn't do that, but luckily she didn't get freaked out by it. Maybe she didn't care. We've been married 41 years. I'm going to ask her.
Right. Okay. I got to go back. Out in the field, you're talking about the Ripcord campaign. You get out there kind of probably late spring of 1970, May or thereabouts. The Ripcord campaign sort of starts around late March, early April. It gets really intense in July.
Right. In June is where the cherries died in June.
Yeah. In June, there's a lot of activity going on in the area. In July, from the beginning of the month, the base is under siege, essentially, for 3 weeks before they evacuate it. In the meantime, a variety of companies are sent in to operate in that area, including D Company of 1st of 506, your battalion.
Right.
And so, did you deal with casualties from that company then?
We did. The Delta Company, of course, the 4 medics were part of my responsibility. We lost 2. Preacher, who got his femoral artery cut and bled out. He went to the side and nobody saw him, and he died. And then Doc Schultz, who was the problem guy, but he jumped on and grabbed the skids and was either shot down or dropped. so we lost those two, and then we lost Ranger, the captain, and who I didn't really know. I didn't really spend much time with officers. I heard about him from our medic, Dr. Finley. He was his last day out. His fiance just arrived at his parents' house from Germany. He was just taking us one last route out, and then he was going to go home. And he was on the last chopper, and the chopper was shot down, and he jumped out one side. The medic and the radio man jumped out the other side, and the rotors cut Ranger in half. So it's like the odds. And I was glad in a way it wasn't Finley. He just had a new baby. It's like, so those were our people. And so I did, during the actual battle, during the support of it, I flew back to Evans because we had a staging hospital of 323 or something. And I helped them offloading the wounded and triaging them. There was most of them you couldn't do much with. They were so badly hurt. But
yeah, and they were, I think, on the same day, because it was right at the time of the evacuation, a couple other companies were getting shot up pretty badly too. So we'd have men from different units kind of just coming in together,
and I wouldn't have known what unit was what. I just saw bloody bodies. And,
right.
We all the medics just took what they could and could do what they could. And the first one I was handed was a guy that his whole face was shot off by a rocket. So like, where do you put pressure on somebody whose throat is gone?
Yeah.
I think he lived. I think they did tell me later that he lived. I can't imagine why.
The percentage of people who got back to an aid station or a field hospital alive, who stayed alive afterward, was awfully high. If they got that far, they'd usually make it.
And the one I had to take a knee back, then somebody brought me when I was in the firebase, said, what do I do with this? And I go, well, I guess we should take it back. It should be buried with somebody. It was a big chunk of knees.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Now, after the Ripcord campaign, did things quiet down somewhat in terms of casualties and that kind of thing?
I think so, because I don't really, nothing is, Ripcord stands out in my memory. More anger at the officers and stuff, and the out and out lie. When you go home and you hear the Stars and Stripes talk about a minor skirmish with minimal damage and one death. Well, no, because everybody was dead. I mean, our Delta company, only 28 guys came back, so it's like, who are they lying to?
I think
who they're lying to.
Even at Ripcord proper, not excluding some of the ancillary operations, I think they had more people killed than on Hamburger Hill.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I think it said in Nolan's book, 77 got killed. Well, there's probably only 100 or so on top of a fire on a mountain, anyways. It's not like they stick 1,000 guys on the top of a mountain.
Yeah. Well, the casualties were mostly in the field around it, but it was still.
Well, it hit the talk. They first hit the. Yeah. So they got the colonel and the XO and a few other people right away. They said.
Well, on the last day, on the evacuation, the colonel got killed on the day when they were going out. But anyway, that's sort of places beyond where you were, documented other places. But basically, it was a large-scale battle with a lot of casualties and a lot of losses, and basically ignored.
Basically hidden.
And hidden, for that matter.
Yeah, I don't think they ignored it. I think they hid it. I think it was, they didn't want the bad PR. And which is why I feel so bad, because if nothing else, it's not like I really want to dig up their bodies and spit on them. But the families deserve to know, where did their sons die? Where did their husbands, what were they doing? What did it look like?
Yeah.
What were they seeing before they died? And how scared were they? And
right.
how much did they hurt? They don't know that, because they have no idea what a firebase looks like.
Right. Okay. Now, in the later months there, sort of getting into the end of the year, 1970, you're getting close to when you're going to be able to go back home again. Did your own attitude or way of doing things shift at all? I mean, did you become short in a way that registered?
Yeah. You get short. And that's why, at the end, I feel bad about the guys who are going to battle now. You only have so much luck when you go into combat. It's doled out. There's a certain amount for each day, and you got to make sure it lasts till that last day. But on the last day, if you get out of there, you know it lasted. But they got to come back, and I don't know where the extra luck is coming from for them. But no, I knew exactly who, and I stayed close to a bunker that last week or so. That bunker, and I don't care. There was big rats in it, and I said, I don't care. I told him, I said, I'm coming in there. If I even hear anything that sounds noisy, I'm going to be in there. So you better leave. But no, I was very aware of the time.
Did you keep a short timer's calendar?
Oh yeah. Crossed it off and looked at it every day. Wrote down all my letters, how many days left in a wake up.
Mm-hmm.
I did all that stuff just like everybody else.
All right. Are there other things that kind of really kind of stand out in your memory about that year in Vietnam that we haven't kind of got into here yet?
Of course, Ripcord was the big thing. And I think you covered a lot of territory. It meshes. I notice when I go back and look at my letters and stuff, what I thought was scattered over a long period of time all might have happened in one short period. And in my mind, it got stretched out. And I'm surprised at that. I'm surprised that I really... What did I do all those other days? Did I just sit around? Or, I noticed when I had a hooch, so I know I made a Christmas tree. So when did I do that? And stuff like that. So I know there were things. I know there were good times, and it was good medicine. I learned good medicine, and I liked being around people who believed in medicine, who believed in helping others.
So most of the corpsmen and medical staff did their jobs well?
I think so, yes. I think a medic is a pretty special person. Not because I am one, but...
That's what the grunts say. So.
It's because that they're committed, and it is ingrained in our training. And I'm surprised because I'm not one to take to training well. I'm not disciplined still. I told you, I'm a hospital administrator, and I'm used to calling the shots, not having a shot called on me.
Right.
But for some reason, the training I got for that has stuck, and stuck hard. I was the volunteer fireman and rescue when I first came home. When I came home, within 5 days, I was working at University of Michigan Hospital as a nurse in a burn unit. I was in school that same week at Eastern at night for my BS. I was in fire rescue in our town. I was in a med pool as a nurse going to other hospitals doing stuff. So I was plenty busy. And I worked full-time in the burn unit, and I worked full-time then in the hemodialysis unit, then in the operating room. And then at that time, I got an MBA at night, and I got a Master's of Hospital Administration and during the day while I was working. And then I was the hospital director's assistant, so I got exposure to the national scene and all the politics. So I got to do a lot of things, and always that feeling of being responsible for the people around me. It never went away.
Okay. Let's back ourselves up a little bit. Physically, what's the process for getting you out of Vietnam?
Again, going hitchhiking. Again, it's hitchhiking. Everything is hitchhiking. They come by and give you orders. Somebody drives by and said, "You can leave," and you don't argue. And I left everything there. I didn't. I carried some uniforms back with me because I didn't know if I was going to change. But I didn't change. You're wearing your same crappy, muddy clothes that you were wearing, and then next thing you know, you're in Seattle, Tacoma Airport, and someone's giving you a clean uniform and a steak dinner, even though ours was 3 o'clock in the morning. You do a physical, and then you fill out the paperwork, and they give you an airplane ticket, and you go. It's like a whirlwind, but it was. And I know we must have been on that military plane because we saw it, but at some point we changed to a human airplane, a charter airplane.
Yeah. Well, they may have flown you to Japan or Okinawa or someplace.
We did land in Japan, but I think we were already in a regular plane because we didn't get out of it.
Or you might even have flown from Hubei or someplace down to Cameron or Da Nang and flown out of there. And
then some kind of Flying Tiger or some kind of some cheap charter thing. But I know we landed in Japan, and they said you can't mix with the regular people. So we didn't. And then we landed in Seattle, and they dropped us off, take a shower, and fed us, and had that wonderful meeting that I told you about.
So basically, what's the reception at Seattle? You're back in the States now. What do they do with you?
The reception wasn't too great. Mostly we did it. I was in charge of giving physicals, and so we landed. They give you a steak dinner. It's automatic, even though it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what time we were in. Who knows what time it was? But in my memory, it was 3 in the morning wherever I was. Then they give you a uniform. They have a meeting where the guy has a clipboard and says, "I don't suppose any of you want to re-up." He said, "Didn't think so." He didn't even wait. He checks it off, and then he said, "Here's your next assignment. Here's the next fort you go to," and he says, "And here's your inactive reserve commitment." He says, "But forget it." He said, "Just go home." He says, "Nobody wants you."
Meaning?
We're crazy.
Okay, so that no one will want to hire you. No one will.
Well, nobody in the Army wants
Oh, the Army doesn't want you anymore.
It says nobody wants you. It says they don't want you in active reserves. They don't want you in another fort.
Okay. Now, did you have any time left in your enlistment when you got back?
Yeah. Well, no, I got out early for school. I take that
Mm-hmm.
back. So I think officially, I didn't go to inactive reserves at all. I got a letter saying you're done. You don't need to do anything else.
So when did you get back to the States?
January 24th, 1971.
All right.
After missing my plane.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you able to, and then when do you start college classes again?
It was within 5 days I was in school. In that week's time, I started work and was starting classes.
And was that at Michigan?
Eastern.
Eastern Michigan first. So you did that, because you ran through that quickly here a moment ago. What training did you do at Eastern?
Well, I had finished my BS, the
Okay.
stuff I started at Michigan State
Right.
that I didn't do. So I was doing that, but I was working at U of M full time as a nurse in the burn unit, which,
Okay.
same screens, just a different temperature.
Right.
So it was, it's not like a different world.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually, it was an excellent use of my training.
Yeah.
I got all the bad duties. And I was the ace scrub and tub team where I had a patient actually look at me and say, Steve, if I ever need a heart transplant, I want yours. And he was being sweet. So I said, that's nice. Why? He says, because it's never been used. So I have to say my training did continue. So I did that, and I was working in our town's fire rescue squad and helped the chief develop an ambulance service. I also worked in personnel pool where I was assigned as LPN to area hospitals to do temporary work.
Okay.
So I was busy, plus we were just gotten married.
How did you wind up moving into hospital management kind of work?
This is the weirdest thing because I didn't know what that was. And yet, when I look at my records that my congressman got for me, in my sign-up papers, my 1967 enlistment papers, it said, what career do you want? And I put hospital administration. I had no idea I wrote that. I had no idea that I even knew what it was. And yet it was at U of M when I was working in probably the OR, where the director of nursing came to me in the cafeteria and said, I think you should consider this. And I says, what is this? So I went over to the school. U of M I was working at U of M. It was this U of M school. It was right there. So I walked over and talked to them. And I don't think they wanted to take me, but I think I was by then working for the hospital director. And I think, I imagine he must have said something because I wouldn't have taken me. But not with that history. And next thing I know, I was in that school. So I had to work full time and still go to class full time. But I had started, my MBA was 4 years, my MHA was 4 years. I had already started 2 years of my MBA, so for the next 2 years I did both MBA, MHA, and work full time. So it was kind of a busy 2 years, but I didn't want to waste the first two of my MBA. And actually I'm glad I did, because I'm not glad I went through all that trouble, but it was good training and two very important to each other fields, but very different. So, and of course I would say things like, that's not the way it is in the real world, and get in trouble whichever school I was in.
All right. You've engaged this issue in a number of different ways already, if you want to pull it together a little bit. How do you think in the end your time in the service wound up affecting you? I mean, how were you different when you came out?
Well, I think actually, as much as I hated so much of it, as much as I hated being forced to obey, which is not in my nature, I think it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I think it took a very immature, irresponsible me from my 2 years at Michigan State where I did nothing except play and forced me to realize that there are things out there that are more important. And as a hospital administrator, I was so much more attuned to patient care than even many of the doctors, let alone any other administrator. And because of that, I was, the president of our national association, two of them that we have, and I've been published, and I've been on our state association. So I've done a lot of things, not because I'm brilliant, but because I'm not afraid of things. I'm not as afraid. I had one battle when I first got to my hospital, and the CEO was looking through the window, and he called me in and said, "Do you need any help?" And I go, "There's no guns in there. So why do I need help against the Department of Doctors? You know? So it's just that you learn what's important. I learned dry socks are important. Other things aren't. I learned only to be afraid if somebody has a gun and I don't. And I learned that if you stand tall, people will respect that. And if they know that you know, and docs are real big. This doesn't probably apply to anybody who's not a hospital administrator, but they wave the caduceus at you all the time. You know, if I don't have this kind of number 2 pencil, this patient's going to die. That's how they get what they want. But they can't wave the caduceus at me, and I could sit there with them, and we have many nights of sitting around and saying, I've had patients die in my lap. I've had that. I've failed to save somebody, which is more debilitating than something else. But to fail to save them when you could, you think you could. So I said, I've done all that, and they respect that, and you do a much better job. So I think I was very successful because of it. I think I've done pretty well. It's been a great. That's not over, but so far it's been a great life, and I give the Army credit for that.
Now, when you got back home, did you pick up any kind of negative vibes or attitudes from the kind of civilian population?
Nothing other than the Army.
Okay.
The Army, the only negative I got was them. When I got home, my family wrapped me in their arms, and it's been fine since.
Yeah. And did you, once you got back, did you pay any attention to the news of the rest of the war, or the anti-war movement, or anything like that?
Yeah, then I did, and to some extent, and I mostly ranted and raved like I am wont to do about how stupid the lifers are, and I still think they're stupid. And now I'm trying to do a VA project, and so I'm running into them even more, and they haven't gotten any smarter than they were back then. It's maybe a different generation, but they must go to a special school to learn dumbness. But, so I was aware of it. I think I was also, especially at first, I was one of those very lucky. I've always been very lucky, not getting killed in Vietnam for first, but even in my early stage of my career, I came back pretty damaged, and I never realized that until I look back. I mean, I should have been fired so many times. There were so many times I acted out. I was so aggressive and so undisciplined again, but in a different way, undisciplined and armed. A much worse, not necessarily, not literally armed, but in a position where I would not mind taking an argument to a next level as opposed to let's just talk about it. So for some reason I was protected. Different people, and part of that again is the Army gave us LPN licenses the first time. A male nurse in a major medical center is next to God. They don't have any, and they'll do anything. So I got protected because of the job that I was assigned. Nobody wanted to work in a place like the burn unit. Who wants to work where everybody's going to die? Okay, I'm used to that. So some of that was that. Being on the fire department and the rescue squad, that's very much a military kind of thing. So that fit in, but I got the space, I was given the space to reacclimate myself to become a civilized person again. And I was very uncivilized when I came home.
Okay. How did your wife deal with you when you got back?
And she's like she's always has. She's been wonderful. I mean, she's the reason I became civilized again. And her folks. My folks were not around. They were all around the country. But her folks, they took me in. They worked. They didn't work with me in that sense, but they loved me. They helped me, and I was included. I've never been considered in-law. I've always been considered the eldest in the family. And, they made sure I had a car when I arrived. They helped us buy a house. They bring groceries. It was like they were just always there. Always supportive, and that's what saved me. But I could have been probably not that good of a guy. And there's probably a lot of docs right now that tell you I'm still not that good of a guy. Though I did get an award from our doctor association, which they never give to an administrator. So I'm lucky in that sense.
All right. Well, it makes for a pretty good story. So I'd like to close out here by thanking you for taking the time to share today.
Thank you. It was kind of interesting to say a lot of those things out loud.